Amanda Okezie stood in front of the full-length mirror inside her Banana Island mansion, wrapped in a silk white bridal gown adorned with delicate pearl beading. The sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows danced across the fabric, casting an ethereal glow around her. Her makeup was flawless, her hair pinned into a soft chignon with glinting diamond pins, and yet nothing felt right. On the surface, she looked like the perfect bride, but inside, a quiet storm churned. Her chest felt heavy, not from the weight of the dress, but from something deeper, an unshakable ache, a question she couldn't answer. Why am I doing this? The bedroom door opened, and in swept Linda Akolonu, her best friend since secondary school, wearing a champagne-colored maid-of-honor dress and a wide, practiced smile. "Amanda, you look like royalty," Linda gushed, reaching for Amanda's hand. "Kelvin is going to lose his mind when he sees you." Amanda forced a smile. "Thank you." Linda tilted her head. "You okay? Cold feet?" Amanda hesitated. "Maybe. I thought I'd feel different. Happier." Linda laughed, brushing a strand of hair off Amanda's cheek. "Girl, every bride feels like this. You're about to marry the most sought-after tech CEO in Lagos. You've got everything. Beauty, brains, business, and now the man. This is the dream." Amanda nodded slowly, but the words didn't land the way they were meant to. The dream felt like a performance, and deep down, she feared she wasn't the one writing the script. She walked over to the balcony, looking out at the lush gardens and the stretch of blue water beyond. A lone butterfly floated past, free and undisturbed. She thought about Kelvin Obi, the dashing, mysterious entrepreneur who had swept into her life like a whirlwind. When they met 6 months ago at a tech gala, he'd said all the right things. He had confidence, charisma, and a powerful aura. It was hard not to fall under his spell. He was the kind of man society celebrated, ambitious, polished, seemingly perfect. But over time, Amanda had noticed the cracks. The way he shut down conversations about culture, the way he flinched at public vulnerability, how he dodged deep questions about his past, how he made decisions for her, masked as taking care of things. Still, she had said yes, because her mother, Madame Stella Okezie, had reminded her endlessly, "You're not getting any younger, Amanda. Do you know how many women would kill for a man like Kelvin? Marry well now while you still shine." Because her business clients would see her as a failure if she didn't have the complete picture. Because people like Linda, her best friend, seemed so certain of what love looked like, and this was it. But standing in the quiet of that morning, Amanda felt like a puppet in her own life. The dress was perfect. The venue, the Grand Imperial Hall in Lekki, was already filling up with Lagos elites, and yet her soul was whispering, "Run." A knock came at the door. It was Kioma, her younger sister. Dressed simply in a soft pink dress, she was the opposite of Linda. No makeup, no performance. Amanda turned. "You're not supposed to see me yet." Kioma walked in anyway and took Amanda's hands. "I don't care about superstitions. Amanda, are you happy?" Amanda opened her mouth, but no words came. Kioma studied her. "It's not too late, you know, to listen to that small voice." Amanda blinked away sudden tears. "I don't even know what that voice is saying anymore." Her sister hugged her. "Then listen harder. I love you. Not for marrying well. Not for looking perfect. Just for being Amanda." As Kioma left, Amanda stared back at her reflection. Perfectly dressed, perfectly poised, but now slightly cracked. she walked over to the ornate door, heels clicking against marble. With one final breath, she turned the knob and stepped out. What she didn't know was that she was walking not just into a wedding, but toward a moment that would burn away the illusions she'd been forced to wear her entire life. The music at the Grand Imperial Hall swelled with orchestral elegance. The ceremony approached. Guests, draped in flowing akbadas, jel, and designer suits, began to fill the golden-lit rows. Amanda's heart pounded like a drum in her chest. From the dressing room, she watched through a side slit in the curtain as people she barely knew took their seats, ready to witness her union with Kelvin Obi, the man she was about to marry but barely understood. As Zara, the flower girl, began her gentle walk down the aisle, Amanda stood behind the grand entrance doors, her hand clutching her bouquet of white orchids. Beside her, Linda whispered, "Smile wide. This is your moment." Amanda nodded stiffly, her lips trembling into place. Then the doors opened. The room stood as Amanda entered, bathed in light. The air was heavy with floral perfume and whispered admiration. Cameras flashed. 1,000 eyes watched her, but she felt unseen. At the altar stood Kelvin, regal in a tailored navy suit. His face was unreadable. Their eyes met briefly. His expression didn't soften. He didn't smile, no warmth, just calculation. A flicker of discomfort passed through her, but she moved forward. When she reached him, Kelvin leaned in and whispered, "You look nice. Nice. Not stunning, not beautiful, not mine. Just nice." Amanda replied, "Thank you," barely audible. The pastor began the ceremony, delivering verses on love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. Amanda tried to listen, but her mind wandered. She glanced to the front row, where her mother, Madame Stella, sat beaming like a proud queen. Every so often, Stella looked toward the press gallery, ensuring the photographers caught her best angles. Kioma, however, sat stone-faced, eyes flicking between Amanda and Kelvin with growing suspicion. Then came the part Amanda had quietly looked forward to. The Igbo broom-jumping rite, passed down through generations in her family. Her late father had jumped it, her grandparents too. It wasn't flashy, just symbolic, a moment to acknowledge heritage and blessings. A small woven broom was placed at their feet. Amanda turned to Kelvin with a soft, hopeful smile. "It's just a family tradition. He interrupted loudly. "I'm not doing that." A hush rippled through the room. Amanda blinked. "It's not just for show. It means—" Kelvin scoffed, his voice low but sharp. "Let's not start bringing in bush customs. This is a modern wedding. We've moved past this." Gasps fluttered from the audience. Amanda's cheeks flushed with heat, not from shame but heartbreak. "It's important to me," she said, her voice strained. "To my family." Kelvin stared ahead, unmoved. "Let's move on." The pastor looked uncertain. Murmurs stirred the hall. Amanda felt her heart splitting. In that moment, a quiet truth cemented itself. He did not see her, not her roots, not her family, not her worth. Still, she carried on. The vows were read, though hollow. The rings exchanged, though cold. She said "I do" with a voice that did not belong to her. As they walked down the aisle as husband and wife, the applause was soft, polite, almost nervous. Amanda's hand rested in Kelvin's arm, but it felt like stone. His grip was loose, his gaze distant. Inside the opulent reception hall, the tone changed. Bright lights danced across crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed table settings shimmered, music played, and guests drank from glasses that cost more than some of Amanda's childhood neighbors made in a month. Kelvin disappeared into a crowd of groomsmen. Amanda stood by the entrance, alone in her wedding gown, observing the celebration she didn't feel part of. From across the hall, she saw Sandra Obi, Kelvin's cousin, dressed in emerald sequins, step up to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," Sandra began, smiling. "Today is a beautiful day. My cousin Kelvin has made a bold choice, choosing love across class lines." Laughter rippled, some amused, others uncomfortable. Sandra continued, "This cake, like this marriage, is layered. Some bring money, some bring family honor, and some bring, well, potential." Amanda's breath caught in her throat. She felt the slap in those words. Guests chuckled nervously. Madame Stella stiffened. Kioma clenched her fists under the table. Amanda turned to look for Kelvin. He stood by the bar, laughing. Her voice trembled as she whispered to herself, "I don't think I belong here." Linda approached with a glass of champagne. "Don't worry," she said with a wink. "Sandra's always extra." But Amanda saw something in her friend's eyes, a flicker, a glint of guilt. Before she could dwell on it, a familiar voice from the past rose in her mind, her father's. "A name that does not shelter you is not a name you wear proudly." And suddenly, the last threads holding Amanda's silence began to snap. Amanda sat stiffly beside Kelvin at the sweetheart table, her smile long gone. The band played softly. The aroma of grilled prawns and aged wine filled the air, and guests snapped selfies beside golden floral walls. But none of it touched her. Across the table, Kelvin scrolled on his phone, occasionally smirking at his screen. He hadn't looked at her since the broom incident, nor had he said a word during Sandra's speech. His silence was louder than any insult. She leaned slightly toward him. "You heard what Sandra said, right?" Kelvin didn't look up. Amanda's voice was barely above a whisper, strained but firm. "She mocked my family, in public. You said nothing." He blinked slowly. "It's not that deep. You're being sensitive." Her heart thudded. "I'm not. That wasn't a joke. And your silence says everything." Kelvin finally turned, his tone sharp. "Can we not do this here? Don't embarrass yourself." Amanda froze. "Embarrass myself?" Before she could respond, Linda appeared again, this time with two women Amanda didn't recognize, both clinging to her like perfume. Their laughter was too loud, their smiles too tight. One of the women leaned toward Amanda and said, with a syrupy tone, "You're so lucky. Kelvin could have married any girl, but he chose you." Amanda's stomach turned. Linda smiled, avoiding her gaze. "Let's toast to that." The women raised their glasses. Amanda did not. She stood, quietly, gracefully. Her sister, Kioma, watching from the far table, immediately rose too, eyes locked on Amanda. Something had changed. Amanda began walking slowly toward the center of the hall, where the wedding cake towered in white and gold. Guests gathered, phones ready. The band slowed, the lights dimmed. A hush fell. As Kelvin joined her reluctantly, Amanda whispered, "Are you proud of how tonight has gone?" Kelvin chuckled under his breath, slicing into the cake. "You're overthinking again." She dropped the knife. It clattered against the tray, startling a few nearby guests. Amanda turned to him fully. "Do you love me?" Kelvin blinked. "What kind of question is that? We're married." "Are you in love with me?" He said nothing. She stepped back. Then why are we doing this? Enough, Kelvin muttered. You're ruining everything. He reached for her arm, but she pulled back. You don't respect me. You've never defended me. You don't even see me. And then, before anyone could stop it, Kelvin's hand flew across her cheek. The sound cracked through the ballroom. Gasps rose, glasses spilled, music stopped. Amanda stumbled back, stunned, not from the impact, but from the public exposure of what she had always feared. This wasn't love. This was image, control, ego. Everyone froze. Phones rose. Even Sandra, even Linda looked stunned. Amanda didn't cry. She straightened, wiped her cheek, and walked to the DJ booth. Please, she said quietly. I need the mic. The DJ hesitated, then handed it to her. She stepped into the spotlight. Her voice echoed through the silent hall. I should have walked away sooner, but I stayed. For my mother, for my brand, for silence. I wore the dress. I smiled through the insults. I ignored my own voice. Gasps, a few sobs. Kioma had moved closer now, eyes glassy with tears. But I won't stay another second with someone who shames my family, disrespects my roots, and dares to lay hands on me in front of the world. You think this ring defines me? She took it off, slowly. No, I define me. Amanda placed the ring on the glass cake table beside her. This wedding is over. And she walked away. Through the stunned crowd, past the guests who once smiled politely, past Linda, whose eyes now welled with something that looked like shame, past her mother, who sat frozen, lips trembling. Only Kioma followed, heels clicking, arms open. As Amanda stepped out into the night air, her face was burning, but her spirit alive. The door shut behind her. The noise of the world was silenced. But the truth had been set free, and by morning, the entire world would hear it. By the time Amanda and Kioma reached the quiet parking lot outside the Grand Imperial Hall, Amanda's chest felt as if it had split wide open, not from pain, but from release. The humid Lagos night wrapped around her like a balm. Her heels clicked slowly on the pavement, her gown dragging behind like a final chapter torn loose. Amanda! Kioma caught up, breathless and teary-eyed. You did the right thing. You did the bravest thing. Amanda turned to her, her voice low. I wasn't brave. I was just done. They embraced tightly. Kioma held her like a sister who had been waiting to breathe again. Inside the hall, murmurs swirled like smoke, but outside, Amanda found silence. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like someone else's puppet. She was Amanda Okezie, not a bride, not a brand, not a prize. They drove back to Kioma's Yaba apartment, a modest two-bedroom filled with cozy pillows, Ankara throws, and the scent of lemon candles. Amanda peeled off her wedding gown in silence, left with nothing but Kioma's oversized t-shirt and sweatpants. Her cheeks were still hot, but not from the slap, from the memory of every ignored red flag. She curled up on the couch with a warm mug of ginger tea. Kioma placed a blanket around her and whispered, You're safe now. The world, however, was no longer quiet. Amanda's phone buzzed, then buzzed again and again. She ignored it. But then Kioma's phone rang, and then Linda's name popped up on her WhatsApp. Kioma's eyes widened as she opened her messages. Oh my God. What? Amanda sat up. Kioma turned the screen. There it was. A video. Blurry but unmistakable. The slap. The stunned crowd. Amanda's voice echoing through the mic. This wedding is over. And then, her walking away. Thousands of shares. The title, "The Bride Who Walked Out After Her Groom Slapped Her Mid-Reception." The hashtags were everywhere. #walk away with dignity. #justice for Amanda. #the wedding that ended. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Influencers reposted the clip. Celebrities chimed in. Women across Nigeria, across the continent, began using Amanda's speech in reels, calling her brave, bold, a voice for the silenced. Her strength gave me goosebumps. This is not just a bride. This is a revolution. Who slaps a woman in public like that and expects her to stay? Men spoke out too, some apologetic, some defensive, but all watching. Amanda blinked at the screen, stunned. The whole world is watching. Kioma gripped her hand. Let them watch. You just showed them what self-worth looks like. Across the city, Kelvin sat in a darkened apartment, his face pale, his phone buzzing like a grenade. His name was now trending, but not for tech innovation or philanthropy. Instead, abusive groom exposed at wedding. Kelvin Obi slaps bride in front of guests. She walks out. In Banana Island, Madame Stella Okezie sat rigid in her armchair, her press-on nails twitching as she watched Channel's TV replay the clip. Her face was blank. Her daughter, the pride of their lineage, had just humiliated the family by finally telling the truth. She reached for her phone but paused. What could she even say? Back in Yaba, Amanda sat silently as DMs flooded her inbox. Some were from strangers, some from people in her industry. One was from a woman in Kenya, another from Canada, and then, quietly, one message from a verified NGO account offering to sponsor therapy and public advocacy sessions. Amanda's eyes welled up. I didn't plan this. I just wanted to leave. Kioma smiled gently. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions start when one woman decides she's had enough. Amanda laid her head back on the couch. She felt exposed, but also seen. For the first time, the shame was no longer hers to carry. But the story was far from over. Because within 48 hours, a new headline would emerge, and Amanda's nightmare would take a new, darker turn. 2 mornings after Amanda's walkout, Lagos woke up to breaking news. Tech CEO Kelvin Obi, arrested by EFCC in multi-billion naira fraud case. Amanda stared at her screen, unmoving. The coffee in her mug had gone cold, untouched for hours. The flat in Yaba was silent, except for the low hum of the news anchor's voice on the television. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission confirmed the arrest of one Kelvin Obi, founder of the now-defunct K-Next Solutions, following an extensive investigation into an online investment scam ring that defrauded individuals and companies across Nigeria and abroad. Amanda's throat dried. Her fingers trembled. On the screen appeared a blurry video. Kelvin being led out of his Banana Island apartment by plainclothes agents. No sunglasses, no designer jacket, no swagger, just handcuffs and silence. Beside him stood an older man, his supposed business mentor, the same voice Amanda had heard whispering behind the hall on her wedding day. She's quiet. That's why he chose her. She won't poke around. She remembered the groomsman nodding in agreement. She'd thought it was a joke. Now she saw it for what it truly was. Strategy. A carefully calculated move. Kelvin didn't love her. He needed her as a prop, a well-dressed distraction, a public image of stability, a bridal shield from scrutiny. He had orchestrated the entire wedding not to begin a life, but to finish a con. Amanda clutched her chest, not from heartbreak, but rage, deep, Cold, clarifying rage. On her phone, Kioma burst into the room. "Amanda, have you seen?" Amanda simply nodded, eyes still on the screen. Then came the words that broke her further. Sources within the investigation report that Mr. Obi had proposed marriage to Amanda Okezie to present a facade of responsibility and legitimacy to potential investors. Court documents also indicate that his company had no active clients and all financial statements were forged. Her hand dropped the phone. Her love life had been a smokescreen, her heartbreak, a business plan. Tears welled up in her eyes, but this time they weren't quiet. They fell like rain. Kioma rushed to her, gathering her in her arms. "It wasn't your fault," Kioma whispered fiercely. "You didn't miss the signs. He was a liar, a criminal, and you were never meant to save him." That night, Amanda scrolled through images of her wedding, now archived by tabloids, reposted by feminist pages, dissected by YouTubers and podcasts. But in the middle of the chaos, one photo struck her the most. Margaret Obi, Kelvin's once proud mother, being approached by journalists at her Ikoi home. Her scarf covered most of her face, her eyes red, hollow, her mouth tight with shame. She once told Amanda she wasn't polished enough for her son. Now the world saw whose reflection truly cracked. The next morning, a silver tray was laid on a carved wooden table in Amanda's family compound in Owerri. It held the returned bride price, carefully rewrapped in soft cloth, envelopes of untouched naira, and unredeemed wrappers. No one from the Obi family showed up to collect it. The village elders watched as Amanda's uncle lifted the tray and handed it to the officiating elder. "It is finished," he declared. "Let peace return to this woman's spirit." Amanda stood, head covered in a simple wrapper. No makeup, no fanfare. Just a woman reclaiming her name in the presence of the ancestors. She did not weep. She bowed. Later that night, as she and her mother sat beneath the mango tree, Madame Stella finally spoke. "I pushed you into that marriage," she said softly. "Not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't trust that love alone would be enough. I forgot you were already complete." Amanda reached for her mother's hand, holding it without blame. "I forgive you," she whispered, "because I know now I needed to walk through fire to find myself." But Amanda's story was not over, because in the quiet of her healing flat in Ikoyi, a blank journal awaited. And within its pages, a new voice was rising. The flat in Ikoyi was small, quiet and modern, a far cry from the glass and gold palace she once occupied in Banana Island. But Amanda Okezie had never felt more at peace. She'd spent the last 2 weeks in solitude. No interviews, no headlines, no noise. Just her, a stack of unread messages, and the sound of her own breath returning. The walls were painted cream. The curtains billowed with ocean air. A small shelf held books, candles, and a ceramic sculpture of an udu, the Igbo water drum her grandmother once played during moonlit stories. Amanda had placed it there on purpose, a symbol of roots, a reminder that soft doesn't mean weak. She had changed her number, given herself room to breathe. Even Madame Stella had kept her distance, sending one message, short and sincere. "I was wrong. I love you, and I am learning." But Amanda hadn't yet found her own words, not for herself, not for the world. Until one evening, sitting on her tiny balcony, she opened her old leather journal. Its pages were yellowing, the spine cracked. Inside were fragments, bits of her past self, poems, fears, affirmations she once scribbled when Kelvin's silence felt like a prison. Her fingers hesitated. Then she began to write. Today, I chose me, not just once, but every day since I walked away. She wrote about the dress that didn't fit her soul, the slap that cracked her silence, the voice that rose from a mic in a hall full of lies. She wrote without editing, without fear. She wrote like a woman no longer afraid of being misunderstood. By morning, 20 pages were filled. By week's end, she had over 100. When Kioma visited and read the manuscript in tears, she whispered, "This isn't just your story. It's ours. It's every woman's." Amanda laughed, surprised by her own healing. "It's just a journal." Kioma shook her head. "No, it's a book, and the world still needs your truth." They gave it a name. I Watched My Own Burial. A publisher in Abuja, already aware of Amanda from the viral video, responded to the pitch within 48 hours. "This is not just a book," the email read. "It's a wake-up call. We'd be honored to publish it." Amanda's voice had once been drowned out by designer walls, fake smiles, and a man with too many secrets. Now, it was bound in print. When the book launched, Amanda didn't throw a fancy party. She did something simpler, something hers. She hosted a quiet reading at a local women's center in Surulere, where survivors of emotional abuse gathered every Thursday. She wore a plain Ankara dress, carried her book in one hand, and stood in front of 20 women. "My name is Amanda Okezie," she said, steady and warm. "And I'm not here because I walked out of a wedding. I'm here because I almost stayed, and staying would have buried me." When she finished reading the first chapter, a woman at the back stood up with tears in her eyes. "My husband hasn't hit me," she whispered, "but I disappear a little more every day, and I don't know who I am anymore." Amanda walked to her and took her hands. "Then let's help you remember." The moment was shared online. Again, it went viral. But this time, not for scandal, for hope. In the weeks that followed, Amanda founded The Voice That Stays, a foundation dedicated to helping women and men rebuild after emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and silence. She hosted workshops, school talks, and survivor-led panels. Her DMs became a library of gratitude from as far as Accra, Johannesburg, Nairobi, and Toronto. And through it all, she kept writing, not to perform, not to prove, but to stay whole. One evening, she sat in her flat with the windows wide open, sipping lemongrass tea. Outside, Lagos moved on. Inside, Amanda glowed, not from the spotlight, but from stillness. It had been 3 months since Amanda walked out of the Grand Imperial Hall. The world had moved on to newer scandals, fresher headlines, but Amanda Okezie had not faded. She had risen. The first 1,000 copies of I Watched My Own Burial sold out in 5 days. Reviews poured in, calling it a balm for the silenced, a modern Nigerian manifesto on dignity, and a mirror to many marriages hidden in shame. Bookstores began showcasing it front and center. Talk shows invited her on. Radio programs quoted her passages, and podcasts retold her story like a parable of feminine awakening. But Amanda kept a quiet profile. She was no longer interested in validation, only in impact. Her foundation, The Voice That Stays, had started group therapy programs and launched a scholarship fund for women fleeing emotional and financial abuse. They had already helped 17 people find housing, restart businesses, or access healing resources. Amanda didn't flaunt this on social media. It was private, sacred. But Lagos remembered her. One Friday afternoon, she was invited to speak at a university conference on resilience. She hesitated. The event would be public, cameras, press, possibly him. But Kioma said gently, "You're no longer the woman who stood silently at the altar. You're the one who rewrote the ending." Amanda agreed. On the day of the conference, she wore a simple white jumpsuit with gold earrings shaped like Nsibidi symbols. She stood backstage at the Civic Center, holding her book to her chest. She thought about how she once felt buried in chiffon and expectations. And now, she was standing in her truth unveiled, unscripted. When she stepped on stage, the applause was instant. Not for a celebrity, not for a survivor, but for a truth teller. She paused before speaking, then smiled. They thought I had everything. Beauty, business, a man, a mansion. But what they couldn't see was that I was dying inside, slowly, quietly, beautifully buried in silence, until I said no. The room held its breath. And when I did, I heard something I hadn't heard in years, my own voice. She went on, not to recount her pain, but to gift others a map out of theirs. Her words weren't polished. They were raw, real, full of cracks and strength. After the event, a young woman approached her backstage. She looked no older than 22, her voice trembling. "My mother watched your speech online, and she finally left my father," she said. "I just wanted you to know. You gave us both a way out." Amanda's eyes welled with quiet tears. "Then it was all worth it," she whispered. Back home in Ikwi that night, Amanda sat with her journal no longer leather-bound, but now embossed with her own initials. She wrote, "I used to think the worst thing that could happen was being left at the altar. But the worst thing would have been to stay. To keep shrinking. To keep explaining my worth. I was not buried. I was planted." She closed the journal. Outside, the city lights blinked against the sea. Her phone pinged. A message from an old friend. Then another from a documentary producer. Then one from someone unexpected. "Linda, Amanda, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but if there's ever a moment where I can apologize face to face, I'll be here. I betrayed you, and I live with that every day. I am sorry." Amanda stared at the message. She didn't reply. Not yet. Not out of hate. But because healing meant choosing when, not just how, to respond. Her story had gone from scandal to scripture, from a trending clip to a movement. But Amanda no longer needed the world to clap for her, because she was no longer performing. She was becoming. It was a calm Sunday morning in Owerri. The compound was quiet, save for the rustle of Harmattan winds through the mango trees. Amanda sat beneath the old almond tree her father planted the year she was born, now full grown and giving shade like an elder watching over her. She was home. Not the mansion in Banana Island, not the healing flat in Ikwi, but home, the earth that raised her, the roots that reminded her who she was long before love, before betrayal, before fame. Dressed in a soft Ankara wrapper and bare feet, she watched the children of her cousins chase one another through the courtyard. One of them, little Chidera, stopped to hand her a flower and said, "Auntie Amanda, are you still famous?" She laughed. "No, just free." That night, her mother, Madame Stella, sat beside her on the porch. She was softer now, less loud, less urgent. The woman who once demanded perfection now folded laundry in silence. "Do you know what I admire most about you?" her mother said. Amanda shook her head gently. You walked into a hall wearing the world's expectations, she said, and you walked out carrying only your soul. Amanda looked up at the sky, where stars blinked against the velvet dark. I think I had to lose everything, she said, to finally find my voice. Madame Stella nodded. Then maybe we both found it. They sat together for a long time. No need for apologies anymore. Just presence. Months passed. Amanda's foundation expanded into 6 cities, helping victims of emotional violence gain not just shelter, but clarity. She spoke less on TV now, declined interviews, turned down a documentary offer from a global streaming platform. Instead, she wrote. She led workshops. She taught girls in secondary schools how to listen to the voice beneath the noise. Her second book, Unlearning Silence, was quieter, more meditative, less viral, more eternal. And then one day, on the anniversary of the wedding, Amanda visited the Grand Imperial Hall, not to relive it, but to reclaim it. She walked in alone. The staff recognized her instantly, offered a VIP tour, which she gently declined. She stepped into the same aisle where she once walked toward a man who never saw her. This time, she walked alone, head high, shoulders relaxed, eyes full. In the center of the hall, she sat in the front row. Not for the stage, for herself. She closed her eyes and breathed. Then, from her bag, she pulled out a small bouquet, not of roses, but of wildflowers, the kind that grow without permission, without design, beautiful just because they dare. She walked up to the altar and placed the bouquet there, not for mourning, but as a monument to rising. Then she turned around and left without fanfare, without photos, without witnesses. But in that moment, Amanda Okezie was everything she never needed to be told she was. Whole, holy, and finally, home. It had been a year since Amanda walked away from a marriage meant to silence her. A year since the slap that turned into a spark. A year since the world called her broken, only to watch her build herself whole. The world hadn't forgotten her, but Amanda had chosen a different rhythm. She lived slower now. Her mornings began with sunrise walks on the Ikoi promenade, soft music in her ears, and her journal in hand. She still wrote, daily, but not for publication, for peace. On the anniversary of her book's release, the Voice That Stays Foundation hosted a private gathering in Abuja, not to celebrate fame, but impact. They called it Stories of Becoming. Survivors from across Nigeria, women, men, teenagers, gathered under soft lantern lights and told their own stories. The teacher who left a loveless marriage and built a school. The banker who reported her abuser and helped 20 others do the same. The teenage girl who found her voice through Amanda's journal prompts and now led spoken word workshops in Jos. Amanda sat in the front row, no stage, no crown, just presence. When asked to speak, she stood slowly and held the mic gently. She looked around the room at lives changed, at faces shining not from lights but from liberation. I used to think the story ended when I walked out of that hall, she began. But the truth is, that was only the beginning. Because every time one of you says, I chose myself, my story lives again, not in headlines, but in hearts. The applause was quiet, reverent, not for spectacle, but for truth. Later that night, Amanda stood alone at the hotel balcony, a cool breeze brushing her skin. Her phone buzzed once. A new email. Subject: TEDx Women Lagos Invitation. Body: Amanda, we believe your story is not only powerful, it's essential. we invite you to take the stage this November. Theme: unshaken. She smiled, not out of vanity, but because she now knew she could choose whether to say yes, and whatever she chose, she would still be whole. Back in Overi, a small plaque had been installed at her family compound. It read, "In honor of every daughter who remembered she was never meant to shrink." She did not run. She returned not to seek approval, but to stand on truth. People still called her the bride who walked away, but Amanda no longer corrected them. Because the truth was deeper. She had walked into herself. And from that day forward, she never looked back.